So hello everybody, this talk is part of a Solway Firth Partnership project, which will help you find out more about the archaeology of the Rhins of Galloway. It's supported by Gaelic Community Fund, and the project includes 3 online guides, which I'll post a link in the chat for you to see, as well as a series of talks, of which this is the last, and it's all part of Archaeology Month. So I'll hand over to Eilidh, who is going to speak to us about place names in the Rhins of Galloway.
My name is Eilidh and I work for Ainmean-Aite and h-Alba, which is the Gaelic Place Names of Scotland, the National Partnership, Advisory Partnership for Gaelic Place Names in Scotland. And our main remit is to provide correct and consistent forms of Gaelic place names, mainly for signage and things like that. But we do sometimes get to do some more exciting projects such as this. And I've been looking at the names of Curcum parish in particular for nearly 3 years now. And it's probably going to be a lifetime work, but I enjoy it. So that's all that matters. So my talk today is about some of the Gaelic place names found along the shores of the Rhins of Galloway. Along with some of the more transparent names such as Dromore, I will be taking a look at a few of the more puzzling names found on the OS map, not all of which are resolved as of yet, maybe one day. Let's talk about the Rhins itself first. I didn't know this myself until recently, and I'm not sure if it's myth or fact, but it is said that the North Rhins was the location of one of the 3 national thrones of Britain. The other 2 found in Gallywig and in Cornwall and Curcum in South Wales, and in the Celtic place names of Scotland, Watson states that there can be no doubt that Penrhyn is the Old Welsh name for the northern end of the Rhins of Galloway. Penrhyn in Welsh means peninsula, and there are several place names across Wales and Cornwall that contain Penrhyn. Sionnydd refers to royalty. Apologies for my poor Welsh pronunciation. My poor mother attempted to guide me earlier today, but I think I need a bit more practice. So what does the word Rhins actually mean? It comes from the Gaelic Rhine, a promontory or headland. There are many Gaelic words that mean the same thing, but Rhine seems to refer to a long headland or neckland, as is referred to by O'Brien when referencing the many necklands of Ireland. Of course, here we have 2 necklands, the North and South Rhins, giving us the plural Neraniv, meaning the headlands. The Scots-English form is Gaelic Rhine with English plural S. The Rhins of Galloway is not the only Rhins in Scotland, however. We also have the Rhins of Isla, commonly understood today as the divisions of Isla. Amusingly, it is referred to as the Runs on Watt's map dated in 1760. Side by side, you'll see that both peninsulas are of a similar shape. That is a double-headed or hammerhead-shaped peninsula. It rhymes to reason then that both Rhins derive from the same origin. In the case of Isla, it is likely that the Rhins was reinterpreted as Gaelic Rhine division at a later date, and that the original meaning derived from Gaelic Rhine headland. Before we go on to talk about some of the more complicated Rhins place names, here are some of the less confusing names that I'm sure you will be mostly familiar with. Stranraer, the biggest settlement in the Rhins in Gaelic, is Intron Rawer, the broad headland, referencing, of course, the shape of the Rhins Peninsula. if you literally translate in Tron Rawer from modern Gaelic, it means the fat nose, which always makes me smile. Of course, we have many port names in the Rhins coastline, and the most transparent of these would be Port Beg and Port More, Imporst Beck and Imporst More, meaning the small and big port, respectively. Drum in Gaelic is Dreim and means ridge. The settlement of Drumore is in Dreim More, the big ridge, and Drum and Tray, similar to Ballantrae, is Dreim na Traia, the ridge of the sandy shore or beach. Moving north of Stranraer, we have Sulfury. It lends its name to some of the farms in the area and is a little tricky to decipher. The first element, sal or saloch, refers to something dirty, most likely stagnant water, such as a bay that smells bad or a marsh. It is possible that a part of the lands of Sulfury were perhaps marshy before modern drainage was implemented. There are some parallels in Argyll that derive from the same meaning, and I would therefore conclude that Sulfury in Gaelic is Salachari, meaning dirty place. Some of the early forms support this theory. A little north again of Sulfury is Wig Bay. We're probably all familiar with walking around the Wig. It's a very nice place to walk. This image here shows RAF Wig Bay during the Second World War. On the left hand side of the Wig is a piece of land that juts out into Loch Ryan, which we know as the Scar. On Blau's map is written Rinchewig or Rinchewig. I'm not sure how you would pronounce the middle part of this name. This is the only record of this name, and it was collected by Timothy Pont in the 16th century, about the same time as the language shift from Gaelic to Scots. The first element we've already talked about, Rhyn, meaning a promontory. And those of you who are familiar with the area, just looking back at the previous image, you'll see that that's pretty much what it is. It's a promontory. But what about Chawig or Chawig, the second part? This is most definitely Norse in origin and would have been taken into the Gaelic, and also would have been the original name of the bay that we now know as Wig Bay or the Wig. It is most likely that the Wig is an abbreviation of the original Chawig or Chawig. But what about the Scar? Well, it also has a Norse background. Sker means a rock in the sea, but this is not a rock in the sea. It's a pebbly bank, a bank of stones that goes out into the water. In the Scots dictionary, however, it tells us that in the southwest of Scotland, it actually also means a bank of gravel and stones, which is exactly what we have here. This name was very confusing to me at first between the two, the Gaelic name and the Scots name, pretty much because everyone when I read up about this name, everyone said, oh, it's Norse, it's Norse, it's Norse. But how does that explain the Gaelic name? I would say it was most likely that this name that we understand today, the Scar, was coined in the Scots era, and that this is the reason why on Blau's map we have both the Scar, as is written, and Rhynchewich or Chewich for the same place. Just next to the Scar and Wig Bay is the village of Curcum. The interesting thing about Curcum is that most people believe that it is named after St. Columba, and I was one of these people. I had no reason to believe otherwise until I came across a piece of information on the Saints Place Names website, which tells us that a papal letter dated the 14th of December 1397 says the parish church of St. Cummin de Curcum in the Rhins of Galloway. This suggests that it is named after a different saint entirely, despite the fact that there are two wells named after St. Columba in the North Rhins in the parish of Curcum. The other thing that helps this theory that it is St. Cummin rather than St. Columba is the pronunciation of Curcum. It's not Curcum or Curculum or anything like that. It's Curcum, which is not what you would expect if the name came from St. Columba. Okay. The next place name I'd like to talk about is a place name that's now lost, and there also seems to be no trace of the house left. I came across this name on the first edition OS map when I first started my research on the farm names of Curcum. It says Cadlock, and the OS name books tells us that it was a thatched house and that it takes its name from the shore. Now, anyone who's a Gaelic speaker knows that a rocky shoreline is a clatoch, and looking at this, it just looked to me. It looked like, oh, they've mixed up the letters, and indeed it looks like that's what's happened here in the Scots when the Scots took over the Gaelic speakers, as it were. A non-adjacent metathesis happened, which is where a letter moves several places, and we end up with Cadloch or Cadlock instead of Clatoch. Coincidentally, this means that the last part of the word is loch. Oh. Sorry. I'd like to move on to Lady Bay now. Of course, Lady Bay is not a Gaelic name. However, it seems to be an almost direct translation of the original name of the bay, which is Port Macallich, meaning the port of possibly the single woman. Calioch can mean quite a few things. It can mean a single woman, a nun, which is pretty much the same thing. It can also mean an old woman, or quite often in folklore, at least, it means a hag or a witch. But in this case, I don't believe it's the latter. There are quite a few references to it referring to nuns in particular, and it talks about a convent that was possibly at Kirkbride, Kirkbride is a little inland from Lady Bay, as is a place name called Kermanachan, which appears to be Cerrig Vanachan, the quarterland of the convent. Now, I don't know if there's no trace of the convent. There is trace of the church at East Kirkbride and St. Bride's Well there as well, but there's no trace of the convent, so we don't actually know if it ever existed. But it's a nice idea, and it's a nice to know that these names might possibly be linked. Portincally today is a name of a farm near Lady Bay. Not far from Coswer Lighthouse, and this will be on Charlotte's list of archaeological sites around the Rhins coastal path, is Dunsky. When I was looking at names for this talk, this one jumped out as being quite interesting, and I wanted to know more about it. I'd been there before, but I hadn't looked into the name. And I don't know if I'm correct in my derivation, and I might never know, but there is suggestion that it might derive from Scair, which is a Gaelic loanword from Norse Scair, meaning a sea rock. Scairach means pertaining to skerries or rocky area, etc. You'll see on the photos here, the one on the right, this is from the back of the dune, looking out to sea, and this is taken from the west. The other one on the left is taken from the west side of the dune. It does have kind of cliff-like areas on both sides of the dune, so it is quite steep and could be described as a bit of a sea rock. It's not quite in the sea altogether, but it could almost be surrounded by the sea. This was an interesting name when I was researching farm and croft names. Slochlaw, it looks like a Gaelic name, and it may well be, but it may also be Scots. The word sloch in Gaelic has many meanings, one of which is a sea gully, but in Scots, certainly according to the Scots Online Dictionary, sloch does not mean a sea gully anywhere in Scotland, in Scots. However, when I looked at the map nearby, we had some quite clearly Scots or names just below this one, which were Ship's Slough, Bloody Slough, and Barrack Slough. This got me to thinking that maybe in this area, the word sloch from Gaelic, meaning a sea gully, was borrowed into Scots to have the same meaning. There are quite a few sloch names around the coast of the Rhins of Galloway, and I've just written a sample of them here. I'd like to talk about Dally now. On the Rhins coastal path, it will be marked as Dally Bay, but there's a farm here called Dally, and it'll be from the farm that the bay takes its name. There's a word in Gaelic which is dal, and refers to a dale, a meadow, plain, a field, particularly pertaining to water. A hoch would be a Scots word for Dal. And Dally is basically a farm has fields with water crossing it, as you can see from both the map and the image at the top. It is thought that Dally in this case means pertaining to fields by water. The image below is just a nice picture of Dally Bay. Dunsky Castle. Now, this is, for those of you who know the area, this is near Portpatrick. And it's a lovely place to go. And I was very fortunate when I went last year to go when the sun was coming down. So we've got a very nice picture here for you. Dunsky is, well, Dune, first of all, is a hill fort, the same as Dunscarloch that I previously talked about. But the ski part is, we're not sure about. Maxwell thinks that it's Skioch, meaning the winged fort, which is quite possible. Skia means a wing or a shield, so it could possibly mean something along the lines of, you know, that it's well protected, with lots of, maybe the wings are more like kind of shields around the castle, but we may never know. Ardwell, this is a great one. I had a lot of fun researching this name. There are quite a few Ardwells across the whole of Galloway, actually. And everyone seems to have a different idea of what it means. Maxwell thought it meant the art gal, which would be the height of the stranger, or the height of the standing stone. And McQueen thought it was perhaps Norse, with an unknown first element and the second element meaning field, the same element that you find in Corswell. However, when I first saw this name, I certainly agreed with Maxwell that the first element had to be Gaelic arsht, which means high. And there are parallels elsewhere in Scotland. Ardeville, for example, Arshtvala, as Watson suggests. We don't know much about the Gaelic in Galloway because it died out so long ago, but it is quite, we do believe that it was quite different to the Gaelic in the rest of Scotland, and it was possibly closer to some of the other dialects in Ireland, where the BH in Vala, as you would pronounce it in ordinary Scottish Gaelic, might have been closer to w, a W sound. And this is where the w in Ardwell comes from, rather than the v that you see in Ardeville below. And that therefore the name of this farm is Ardvala, but possibly pronounced Ardwala. Ardwell Bay is one of the nicest bays in the Rhins of Galloway, in my opinion, possibly partly because it's not too busy. This is an easy one, but I thought I'd throw it in there just because it is an archaeological site on the Rhins of Galloway, and probably one of the most important ones because it's a broch, so it's very ancient. Charlotte will be able to tell you a lot more about it than I can. but it's simply called Duden Castle, and means Dune means a hill fort. So there's not much we can say about it, but it is a very interesting site if you are ever in the area. It's marked on a lot of maps simply as Ardwell Point. It doesn't reference the castle at all. I've only found so far 2 mentions of it. This is an interesting one that Michael Ansell pointed me to, and I think it will take quite a while to try and, if I don't know if we'll ever work this one out, because it's well, it's a bit all over the place in terms of what it could mean. Port, obviously porscht, we all know what a port is, so there's no question there, and it's pretty obvious it's a port, and thanks to Michael for the image here as well. The second element, money, my first thought was, I wonder if this has anything to do with the town name Ballymoney in Antrim, and I had a look, and there's more than one Ballymoney in Ireland, in Northern Ireland to be specific, and they don't all mean the same thing. So there's another. Yeah, it's a big bag of worms, so to speak. Maxwell suggests that the name is Porscht na Monach Coin, the port of the dog's moor, but that's not very grammatical in terms of at least modern Gaelic grammar. First off, the final element, what Pont has, well, Blau has written as Coney, K-O-A-N-E. It has the N in it, so if it is to do with dogs, then it's obviously the plural con, which would mean that would be none, which is fine because this happens quite often. N's are missed out, and monach and con is not something that wouldn't be plausible, so it's perfectly plausible. Porscht na monach and con is a bit odd, however, and I'm not sure that is correct. So I think there will be a lot of heads scratching to work out what this one actually means. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the Mill of Galloway. In Gaelic, it's Mill of Galloway, rounded headland of the foreigners or lowland Gaels. Basically, what's this name is, the Gal section of this name is an abbreviation of Galloway in Gaelic, which is Gaelgaelh, which means the lowland Gaeltoch. Gaeltoch is the Gaelic speaking area. The Highlands of Scotland is a Gaeltoch. So in some ways you could say that it says the lowland Highlands, but Gaeltoch in Gaelic means a Gaelic speaking area, and in Ireland they have very specific areas that are called Gaeltochs, which are legally Gaelic speaking areas, and they have lots of extra things that you get in the Gaeltoch that you don't get in other parts of Ireland, like your electric bill. You can receive it in Irish if you wish. That's all I really have to say about the Mill of Galloway, except that it is a beautiful place, as you can see by the photograph. That was taken on quite a windy day, and it's still beautiful. So if you've never been, I would highly recommend you go and visit.